Hello, good afternoon, class.
Good afternoon, madam.
How are you all doing?
Fine, you. Yeah, fine.
That's great. Welcome back to Play Analysis and Interpretation. We are continuing our analysis of Henrik Ibsen's A Doll's House, which is a full-length play. Last week, we looked at the synopsis of the play. We looked at the given circumstances, background story, technique, and then the premise. So today our objectives are to look at the characters, dialogue, conflict, and then the theme or our interpretation of the text. All right, so let's begin with character. Let's begin with character. I mean, we know that plays are made up of characters, and it is through the actions of the characters that the conflict and idea in the play are revealed. Without these characters having some motivations that they pursue, that they encounter conflicts along the way and obstacles and all that, we wouldn't be able to know what the playwright is trying to say to us. And so characters are really important towards understanding the ideas that writers are putting across. And like I have hinted at before, characters are modeled after us. And that is why we are able to understand them. That is why we are able to empathize with them. That is why we are able to feel their concerns and their struggles and identify with what they are going through. And so basically, characters are the persons in the dramatic action. And so when you read a play like the one-act plays we have studied so far, if you take The Genius, you know, the characters are the man and the boy. If you take The Open Door, you know, Gertrude and Geoffrey are the characters, and then they mention Jack and others as well. But it is through their interactions with each other, through their actions, that we are able to tell what the story is all about. Sometimes when you read a story or you read a play, it could be about animals, okay, that are given human attributes or qualities that we can still identify, okay? And characters are called characters because there is something peculiar about them. When somebody asks you about your friend, you can say, oh, Abna is like this. Oh, Abna is a very trustworthy person and all that. You are saying all of these things because there are certain traits that you have come to understand or know about Abna. And so there are certain traits that characters exhibit that drive their actions throughout the play. For us to say that something is characteristic of a particular phenomenon, we know that it is a certain pattern of action that thing exhibits, okay? That we are able to know that, oh, this person is like this. It has to be a pattern over the course of the person's life or over a certain period that you observe about the person for you to categorically say that, oh, this person, he's like that. The last time he told me he was going to do something for me and he never showed up. And another person goes like, oh, he did the same thing to me. And then you all conclude that this person is unreliable. That is a character trait that the person has exhibited. Are you following so far?
Yes, please.
Okay. And so when we are talking about people or characters, it is not enough for you to just say that, oh, this person is rude, this person is too religious, oh, this person is too creepy, this person is like this. You need to know why. You need to go a step further to know why this person is behaving in that way. Because that is how you'll be able to fully understand the person's character. And what we are learning here is a key aspect of human relationships. Because I'm teaching you here not to be quick in drawing conclusions about people. You have to have a certain kind of empathy towards people. When the person behaves in a rude way towards you, to try to understand why. Maybe the person is having a very bad day. Maybe the person has experienced something terrible that has created a certain feeling of mistrust in that person for him or her to treat you that way. And so it is important that we go beyond what we observe about the person to know why the person does what he or she does. We need to know why the person behaves in this way in a particular situation and then changes in a different situation. Because that's the only way. If we go further to ask why, then we will be able to understand the underlying reason why the person is the way he or she is. And for us to do that, we can't just look at what we observe. Okay, every object has 3 dimensions. It has depth, it has width, and it has height. Okay, but human beings are not objects. In addition to these, of course, when you look at our physicality, you can see our depth, you can see our width, you can see our height. When we occupy space, you can measure these. But human beings have additional attributes or dimensions. The physiology, your physical makeup, your sociology, and then your psychology. These 3 come together to make human beings very complex, 3-dimensional. When we say something is 3-dimensional, it means that it is not flat. It is more complex. And human beings are mostly very complex because it's not very, like, you can't just look at someone and conclude that, oh, this is how the person is. No, there is depth. There is something deeper through the way the person looks, and then the person's sociological aspects in terms of, oh, okay, how is the person related to other people? What is the person's background? Which class does the person belong to? All of that. And then the psychology. What is driving this person's motivation? All of these come together to give human beings the kind of depth that we can say makes human beings 3-dimensional. Without the knowledge of these 3 dimensions, we cannot fully draw deep conclusions about people. And it is the same with characters. Of course, in plays, there are some characters that are more fully developed than others. Because, I mean, of course, the playwright cannot focus on all the characters, but the main character mostly is fully developed so that we are able to understand the person's motivations in relation to the person's physical makeup and social relations. We are able to see why the person has developed that kind of psychology or that kind of motivation guiding his or her actions. Are you following so far?
Yes, please.
Yes. Okay. So the first dimension is the physiological. Okay. Our physical makeup. okay, it often influences the way we see life or experience life. If you are somebody who is physically challenged, it colors how you experience life. If you cannot see, it colors how you experience life. Okay. And so all of these aspects, especially the way we look, I mean, it is the first thing you see when you see some. Hello. Hello, can you hear me? Hello. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, ma.
Yes,
Oh, okay.
please.
Sorry. I experienced some disruption in the connection briefly. All right. So welcome back. All right. So I was talking about the physical makeup. The fact that the first thing we see about people is their physiology. Okay, whether the person is tall, whether the person is short, whether the person is handsome or not so good looking. All of these things color our perception of the person just at first sight, because that is so obvious. Okay. And the way people look often determines their self-image about themselves. Okay. Somebody can develop a certain inferiority complex. That is a psychological thing because of how he or she looks. Okay, so the physical aspect is very important, and it is the most obvious of our dimensions because that's the first thing you see. And so when you are studying a character, it is important to have that down. Through the play, do people make reference to how the person looks, whether she is beautiful, whether she is physically challenged, whether she is short, whether she is tall? All of these things affect the person's mindset or self-image about him or herself. And so when you are looking out for the physiology, you have to look at age. You have to look at the person's sex. You have to look at height. You have to look at weight, color of hair, eyes, skin, posture, appearance, whether the person is good looking, overweight, clean, neat, pleasant, untidy, shape of head, face, limbs, all of these things. Sometimes there are other characters who might insult the character by the way he or she looks physically. And so through the things they say or through what the playwright describes, you'll be able to know how the character looks physically. Of course, it's not all the time that you get a lot of information about how the person looks physically, but there are bits and pieces of information here and there you can derive from the play about how the character looks, especially the main characters. And so another aspect of the physicality is defects, whether there are some deformities, as in the Legend of Akusika. I mean, she had a deformity and all that. And then whether there are some abnormalities, birthmarks, diseases. In the case of Dr. Rank, for instance, knowing that he is sick is a physical thing that you can, add to the character's physiology. And then there are other things that the person may have inherited. So with the example of Dr. Rank in this particular play we are looking at, you know that he inherited that disease from his father and all that. And so the physicality is the physical makeup of the character. Does that make sense? Is that clear?
Yes, please.
Yes, Lord.
Okay. The next level or the next dimension is sociology or the social aspect of the character. So it has to do with the character's position in life in the particular society he or she lives in, such as class, whether the person belongs to the lower class, middle class, or upper class, the type of work the person does, the person's income, condition of work, the person's attitude towards the kind of work he or she does, the person's education, whether the person has had higher education or not, whether the person, has other kinds of training within the play, the person's home life, who were the person's parents, if they are still living, who are the person's parents? Were they rich? Are they rich? Is the person an orphan? Are the parents separated or divorced? Siblings and all that. Things they have inherited from the parents as well, in terms of certain social behaviors, like the way Helma tells Nora she inherited her bad character from her father and all that. And the person's marital status, religious belief, nationality, all of these are part of the person's sociology. Another thing you can look at is the person's friendships, okay? And whether the person enjoys certain social events, the person has certain political affiliations, the person's hobbies, all of these form part of the character's social aspect. Because when we think about society or sociology, we are thinking about how the individual relates with others within the society. Is the sociological aspects okay? Do you understand?
Yes, please.
All right. And so we have looked at the physical aspects. We have looked at the sociological aspects. These two come together to form the person's mental image of him or herself. And that takes us into the psychological aspect, because it is the combined influence of the person's physical dimension and the social dimension that creates the person's psychological dimension. Okay, the kind of ambition the person develops for life is a product of how the person looks and the person's social standing within society. The person's temperament, attitudes, whatever insecurities the person may have, which is a psychological thing, stems from how the person looks and the person's social aspect. Imagine somebody who is often told by family and friends that, oh, you are too short to do anything, because let's say basketball and modeling, per societal standards and rules, have been the preserve of people who are of a certain height. And then you come and you are told, hey, you can't do this because you are too short. And then you have a character who wants to challenge this. You can't tell me I'm too short. This is what's this is my dream. This is my ambition. I'll prove to you that a short person can play basketball. For instance, you see how the person's physicality or physiology and what the person is told through the social aspects have come together to form the person's, ambition, which is a psychological thing, a motivation. Okay, so the two come together to give us an idea of what motivates the character, the kind of self-image or perception that the person develops for him or herself, the kind of moral values the person develops for him or herself, is often tied up with the person's physical and social dimensions. And so when you are looking at the psychological aspect, you have to look at the person's sex life, moral standards, the person's own personal philosophy about life, ambitions, what frustrates the person's disappointment, whether the person is a pessimist or an optimistic person, the person's general attitude towards life. All of these things are coming from the psychological aspect, whether the person is somebody who is very intelligent or the person is considered not so intelligent. All of these things come from both the physical and and social aspect to give us an indication of who this character is in terms of the person's outlook towards life and what the person thinks he or she can do or cannot do. All of it comes from the person's physicality and the social context and conditions that raise the person. And so you have nature, nurture coming together to create the person's psychology about life. All these dimensions come together to form a three-dimensional character. When you meet a three-dimensional character, you realize that the character is very convincing. The character draws you in. You are able to see the person's deep motivations. You are able to understand the person. You don't ask yourself, but why would you, this doesn't make sense to me. Everything makes sense to you because you are able to see the source of the character's conflict. You are able to see the source of the character's motivation, and it makes sense to you. And so when writers sit down to put together characters, they look at all these dimensions, especially for the characters they are most interested in, the characters carrying the story. You need a fully developed character to be able to carry the story very well. Else you create very dull, unconvincing stock characters. So you need all these three dimensions for your main character to be able to make sense of these characters so that you see what they see, you understand them, and you are better able to follow their story. All right. So when you have badly drawn characters, they create very dull, unconvincing characters, and you sometimes read a story and you're like, the story is boring, or oh, this story is very familiar. I don't think the character's motivation is strong enough for me and all that. But when the playwright or writer takes his or her time to think through all these dimensions and crafts a character with a very strong conflict and motivation for his or her actions and all that, then you see a fully developed character who is able to carry the story well enough for you to be convinced by the end of the play of why he or she acted the way he or she does in the play. Does that make sense?
Yes, madam.
Okay.
Yes, madam.
Do you have any questions about these three character dimensions? There is the physical, there is the social, and then there is the psychological. Do you have any questions about these three?
No, madam.
Okay, so last week I promised you that I'll be telling you the story today. So
Yes, please.
Yes, madam.
yeah, I can see Pokwa. Pokwa is very excited about the storytelling.
Yes, madam.
Oh, yes,
And
madam.
Obed.
Yes, madam.
Okay.
We are very excited.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you the story. You know what to do. You have to be very good participants in the course of the story. And then we'll all have fun learning about the story of a woman who lived in a doll house. Okay. Once upon a time.
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 Okay.
Time.
Okay. I've
Time,
heard.
time.
It is Christmas Eve, and Nora, our character, enters her living room with lots of shopping. She is in such a happy mood. She even tips the porter who carries her things in. She tells the maid to hide the Christmas tree until evening when it is decorated. Her husband, Torvald, shouts from his study asking if she is the one. She responds, nibbling on her macaroons. The macaroons are sweets that she eats. And she hides them when her husband makes his way to the hall to see her. He is surprised at the shopping, calling her a spendthrift, somebody who squanders money. She declares that it is the first Christmas that they haven't had to skimp because he has been promoted to the position of a bank manager. He warns her that his raise wouldn't come for 3 more months, so she should be careful of how she is spending money. She then said they can borrow to have the best Christmas, but he is very strict about borrowing and comes up with a hypothetical situation in which they borrow and spend on Christmas, but he has an accident and cannot work anymore. How then do they pay off the money? She begs him not to talk like that. Then the doorbell rings, and it turns out to be her old friend, Mrs. Lynn, and Dr. Rank, a family friend of Nora and her husband. Dr. Rank goes in to see Torvald, her husband. Nora almost didn't recognize her friend, Mrs. Lynn, because it's been about 10 years since they last saw each other. Mrs. Lynn looks pale and tired. She traveled through the winter on a ship to escape her purposeless life. She married a rich man to take care of her mother and brothers, but the man died 3 years ago and left her with nothing, not even a sense of loss. She has come back to find work because her mother is dead and her brothers have started working and they are able to take care of themselves. She tells Nora about her life as a working woman and comments on how lucky Nora is not to know anything about real life and its struggles. Nora then reveals a secret about how she borrowed money to save Torvald, her husband's life 8 years ago, and has been scraping and working odd jobs to pay off the debt. Mrs. Lind is very surprised that Nora has had to bear such a burden. They both find pride and joy in working to take care of those they love, even though in the case of Nora, she's had to keep it a secret because Helmer's masculine pride would never allow him to be in her debt. Hello. Looks like today I'm experiencing some challenges with my network.
Madam, it's not you,
Hi.
madam.
It's not only me. Eh?
Yes, ma'am.
Maybe it's a conspiracy by the network. They are trying to prevent our storytelling session from happening. Can you imagine? Okay, so are we back?
Yes, ma'am.
So are
Don't
we back?
mind them.
I won't mind them, cry. Are we
Yes,
back?
please.
Okay.
Yes, we
Yes,
are back.
we are here.
So
They lie bad.
let's see. So where were we? We got to where I said they both find pride and joy in working to take care of those they love, even though in the case of Nora, she's had to keep it a secret because Helmer's masculine pride would never allow him to be in her debt. As they speak, there was a knock at the door, and it turned out to be Krogstad, the bank clerk and lawyer who loaned Nora the money 8 years ago. He came to see her husband. Upon hearing his voice, Mrs. Lynn starts and turns towards the window as if he is familiar. Dr. Rank joins the ladies as Krogstad talks to Helma. And he joins the ladies to talk about Krogstad's unscrupulous character. Mrs. Linden is of the view or belief that such people as Krogstad deserve help rather than being thrown out into the cold. Nora suddenly realizes that Helma now has power over all those at the bank, including Krogstad, and she's so excited. She brings out macaroons, which are sweets that are considered illegal in her home because Helma doesn't want her to eat them. And she shares it with Christine and Dr. Rank. She gets Helma to agree to give Christine a job at the bank. Helma, Rank, and Christine leave as Christine needed to get a place to stay. Christine is the same as Mrs. Linden. So if I say Mrs. Lind or Christine is the same person because she's Nora's friend. Just then, the kids arrive with the nurse. Nora plays a game of hide and seek with the kids until Krogstad re-enters through the unlocked door. He blackmails her by revealing that he knew she forged her father's signature when she came for the loan 8 years ago. He gives her an ultimatum to use her influence to get her husband to retain him at the bank, or he will reveal her secrets. She is now distraught. She begins to embroider, but throws it away, and then calls the maid to bring the Christmas tree for her to decorate. Helma returns with work and inquires if anyone came while he was away. When she said no, he revealed that he had seen Krogstad leaving through the front door and that he knows he had come to get her to convince him not to fire him. He tells her that Krogstad committed forgery several times and used crooked means to stay out of jail, making him a morally corrupt person, and that such behavior not only corrupts him, but corrupts his children as well. He even goes further to claim that it is, in his experience as a lawyer, most morally corrupt human beings come from a home where their mothers are chronic liars because the children spend most of their time with the mothers. Can you believe that? I'm not hearing you. I'm not hearing you, and I'll stop telling
Oh,
this.
madam.
Yes, Mother, we can believe.
Okay. All right. He made her promise never to plead Krogstad's case again. She begs him to choose a costume for her to wear to the costume party taking place in 2 days. He promised to do so. She's now left with her world turned upside down with no hope. So at the end of Act 1, Nora, who started off as a happy woman in a very happy home, is left with her world turned upside down. And then Act 2 begins. Nora is desperate about the turn of events. Mrs. Lind visits and promises to help her with the tarantella costume, which is the dance she'll be performing at the masquerade party. She inquires about the strange relationship she has observed between Nora and Dr. Rank and suspects he may be the rich man who may have loaned Nora the money. But Nora assures she would never do something like that. Besides, at the time, Dr. Rank hadn't even inherited the fortune from his father. Nora asks her to go to the maid's room to work on the costume, and that Torvald doesn't like all those things in the living room. Torvald comes with some work, having gone to the bank already. Nora begs Torvald to focus only on her and help her practice because she's very nervous about Krogstad and his threats. She takes advantage of their being together to ask that he reconsiders his decision regarding Krogstad. She expresses fear that he might put something in the newspaper that may ruin them. Torvald figures her fear is coming from her father's experience with the newspaper reports that nearly ruined his reputation. Torvald assures her that his reputation is beyond reproach and that she has nothing to fear. Her insistence even angers him the more, which prompts him to give the dismissal letter to the maid to post to Krogstad without any delay. Nora is distressed. He tells her everybody knows at work that he has decided to sack Krogstad because he calls him by his first name, and that will never do. Plus, he doesn't want, yes, Gifty. Hello? Gifty, were you talking to me?
No, please.
Oh, okay. I thought I heard you saying something. All right. He doesn't want those at his workplace to have the impression that his wife has influence over him. Dr. Rank comes to see Helma, but Nora keeps him briefly with the intention of asking him for money to repay the debt. But she changes her mind when Dr. Rank confesses his love for her. Can you imagine? Her husband's friend confessing his love for her. He tells her he'll do anything for her, but she doesn't tell him anything. She confesses that she enjoys his company more than her husband's because he doesn't try to improve her. He is her friend. He tells her he's waiting for one final confirmation of his deterioration due to tuberculosis of the spine, which he inherited from his father. He tells her to expect a calling card with a black cross on it if the worst should happen, and to keep Torvald from his sick room. While she talks to Rang, the maid brings her a calling card from Krogstad. He comes to tell her about his plan to reveal everything to Torvald so that he can get him to create a position for him at the bank. He blames Torvald for forcing him to go back to his crooked ways. He intends to blackmail him in order to usurp his power at the bank. He warns Nora that even if she tries to commit suicide, it will be of no use because Torvald will still be indebted to him and would want to save her reputation and his. He leaves a letter in the mailbox in which he explains everything Nora has done. She is now totally distressed beyond comprehension. As she ponders her fate, Christine comes to find her and she reveals that Krogstad is the one who lent the money to her. And now he has left a letter in the mail to reveal everything. Christine leaves to talk to Krogstad, taxing Nora to stall Torvald and prevent him from opening the mailbox. Nora tries to convince Torvald to help her practice the tarantella. She dances wildly to the surprise of all present. Her hair is wildly loose. Torvald stops the performance and promises to help her practice and gets ready for the performance the next night. She pretends to have forgotten everything she knows about the dance. He agrees to put everything away until after her tarantella dance tomorrow night. This is her way of keeping him from working, hence from opening the mailbox. The maid comes to announce that dinner is ready. Nora is happy. She asks the maid to serve champagne and lots of macaroons at dinner. Christine returns shortly and is also surprised to find Nora with her hair loose and over her shoulders. She asks Christine to help her fix her hair. As they move away, she reports that Krogstad has left town till the next day, so she has left him a note. She tells Christine to not try and do anything at this point, and that she's now waiting for the miracle. Christine doesn't understand what it is that Nora is expecting. She tells Christine to go and join the others for dinner and that she would join her soon. Nora counts the 31 hours until the end of her life. That is Helmer's discovery of what she has done, because she sees it as the end of everything she has worked so hard to build in her marriage. Helmer calls her and she rejoins them at the dinner. And at this point, we don't know what is going to happen. And so we enter Act 3 and find Mrs. Lind anxiously waiting for Krogstad while Nora and Helmer are upstairs at the party. Krogstad comes. When he returns from town, he just quickly comes because remember in Act 2, she had left him a note that she needed to talk to him. She tells him that her reason for returning to town is so they could take off where they left off in their relationship. She explains that she had to sacrifice her happiness by marrying a rich person so her mother and two brothers could be taken care of. At the time, Krogstad was just starting out and their needs could not wait for him. Now she wants to start a new life with him regardless of his bad reputation, so she can take care of his children. When he realizes that she's being sincere, he's overjoyed and he abandons his idea to blackmail Nora and her husband. He offers to demand his letter back, but she is convinced that it is better that Helmer finds out so that their marriage can be free of the lies that have plagued them over the past 8 years. She tells him to wait at the corner so he can take her home. Upon hearing footsteps, Nora is dragged in by Helmer because she wants to remain at the party. They find Christine waiting in the living room to see Nora's costume. Torvald could not wait for Christine to leave. When she leaves, Dr. Rank also comes in for a cigar and makes small talk about his death. She tells Helmer to go and open his mail now. Remember, all this while she's been trying to prevent him from opening his mail. But now she's telling him to go and open his mail. He finds the 2 calling cards with a black cross on them, and Nora confirms to him that Dr. Rank is shutting himself in to die. She tells him to go ahead and open his mail while she goes to sleep. She makes her way across the hall with the intention of leaving when Torvald barges out of his office to confront her about Krogstad's letter because he has read it. She confirms it is true. He is hysterical. He tells her she has ruined his life and that she is morally corrupt and unfit to be the mother of their children. He goes further to tell her their relationship is done. They will live together, but there will be nothing between them. He resigned himself to be at the mercy of Krogstad and blames her for ruining his life. Then the maid brought a letter for Nora from Krogstad, but Torvald takes the letter and opens it. In the letter, Krogstad states that he regrets his actions and asks for her forgiveness. He returned the note that ties her to him in debt. Helmer tears it all apart and is overjoyed. He's so happy that he's saved. He kept saying, I'm saved from this horrible situation. And then Nora quietly asks him, what about me? He tells her, oh, and of course, you too, you're also saved, that they are all safe now, and that things can return to normal, and that he has forgiven her. Nora suddenly realizes he's not the man she thought he was. She thought he would make good his declarations to save her in times of trouble. But that miracle she was expecting didn't happen. He told her a man would never sacrifice his honor for love. And she replies that many women do that all the time. And indeed, that is what she did to save his life. But when it came down to it, he chose his honor and what others would think of him over her. She leaves him and her 3 children behind, slamming the door on her way out. The end. So, this is the story of the woman who lived in a doll house. This is the story of Nora. When you read the story, where did your sympathy lie? Was it with Nora or with Helma, her husband?
Madam Laura.
Your sympathy went with Nora. Obed, why?
Yeah, because her husband then supports her when in times of trouble.
Okay. What about the others? Any other views? Who did your sympathy go to? I'd like to hear from you. Did it go to Nora or her husband?
The husband.
Jennifer, yours went to the husband. Tell me why. Hello, Jennifer.
He had to make, Madam, he had to make a moral decision.
Okay. And so you think because
Even though his wife made a wrong decision.
So he was thinking about what is right. Okay.
Ma.
All right. Any other views? I'd like to hear from more of you. There's a hand up. Let me see whose hand is it. Is it Isa?
Madam, please, Nora.
Poker, you said Nora.
Yes, please.
Why?
I said Nora because all this while she thought she was in love with the husband. The husband loved her as she loved him, but not knowing the husband was being selfish and yeah.
Okay.
So
All right. So Isa, let's hear from you.
Madam, I go with Nora because she break all the rules just to save the love of her life, but her husband was not grateful.
Okay. All right. These are all valid views you have. And like I always tell you, these plays, they are not just plays. They are not just made up. They were constructed from observations. And the true story is that there was this woman called Laura Keeler who approached Ibsen with a novel she has written for him to get his publishers to help her publish it, because she had gone to borrow money to support her husband's medical bills when he was sick. And it was illegal for a woman to borrow money at the time. And so she had written a novel hoping to earn money from that if Ibsen helps her to publish it so that she can pay off the debt. But Ibsen didn't help her to publish the novel. Rather, he went and wrote a play based on her situation. Well, I mean, there's a lot you can say about his own actions in this situation as well, because he capitalized on her story, even though he didn't help her. He has capitalized on her story to create a doll's house. But when you look at how women were treated at the time, the fact that the social arrangements didn't give women enough power to make certain decisions, even if it is to take care of their family and all that, it was very unfair. And so that is the story of Nora. And Ibsen's plays are mostly social problem plays, because what he does is to expose social problems on stage. And at the time, he couldn't even stay in his own country, Norway, to write some of these plays. And for 27 years, he was living in another country to write, because his plays were considered provocative and offensive at the time. And his government, could have censored his works and all that. Because what those plays did was to push people to ask for social reforms, to want to change the status quo. And so when you look at A Doll's House and its history at the time, many people abandoned the theaters when it was staged, because they cannot understand why a woman should behave like that, leave her home, leave her husband, leave her children. And these are considered more like the sacred duties of a woman at the time. This is outrageous. Why would a woman do something like this? There were several actresses who wouldn't play Nora because her actions, they didn't agree with her actions. Okay. So if you read enough of Ibsen's plays, you realize that they are social plays that expose the problems within his society. Was somebody asking a question? Okay. All right, so let's look at Nora. Considering the fact that at the time, in the late 19th century, the women married very early. For those of you who have seen Bridgerton, you can see how they are so young. By 16, they are already being put out there to get married. And so we can say that Nora could be between mid-20s to early 30s, okay, because they married very early at the time. She's considered beautiful. She has flowing hair, which she ties up properly. And we can pick this up because when she was dancing wildly, the hair came loose, and Christine had to go and help her tie it up. We know she's healthy because we don't get any information in there that she's sick. And then also we know she's a very active woman. She plays with her children, runs around with them, and she dances. Okay, so she's, in terms of her physicality, these are the things that we can glean from the play. And her sociological aspect, we know that she was raised by her nanny, Anne-Marie. She was trained by her father, because she tells us towards the end, the fact that every thought she has came from her father. She was trained by her father. Nothing was said about her mother. Maybe she was an only child also, because nothing was said about her siblings. And we know she belongs to the middle class. She's educated. She's married. She has 3 children. She secretly works odd jobs to pay off the debt that she owed Krogstad. So these are things that we can say about her sociology. And we know that she has friends. She's friends with Christine, and she's friends with Dr. Rank. In terms of certain things she loves to do, she's a good dancer. That is also part of her sociology. And the fact that she's dancing an Italian dance also, we can say that she has appreciation for other cultures as well. And she loves to eat macaroons. All these are things about her that we can find evidence for within the play. And then in terms of her psychology, we know that she, right from the beginning of the play, she had this key motivation to keep the secret from her husband, to save his masculine pride, period. And she would do anything to prevent him from finding that secret out. She was talking about how last winter she got this copy job where she was hiding in her basement and, doing copy work and all that, keeping all of these things from her husband. And from her behavior, we know that she's stubborn. Even when her husband tells her not to do something, she hides and does it anyways. She's stubborn. She eats macaroons, hides them. She tells him, oh, she's not eating anything like that. And we know she can lie. Through all the lies, she tells him to cover up the original lie. She's manipulative. She's manipulative because she can come up with anything to get her husband to do what she wants. Okay. And you can say she's very smart. How was she able to keep all of these from her husband? She found a smart way, though criminal, to forge her father's signature in order to get what she wanted, to save her husband's life, because she needed to take him to Italy for him to live. And she's selfless. It is out of her selflessness that she commits these crimes and, you know, manipulates and lies and does all of these things so she could take care of her husband. She's daring. She was even willing to go and end her life so that she can save the situation. But one thing she didn't have till the very end was self-awareness. Her ability to understand her position within the home and in society is something that came to her later. And it was really important that she came to that realization because she is a three-dimensional character. She's not flat. She's not a stock character who is one way and remains that way from the beginning of the play to the very end. No, you can see how she grows. She was operating with a certain understanding that her husband would do anything for her because he keeps saying it. He keeps saying it that, oh, how I wish something were to happen to you so that I would just save you. So she believed it. In that sense, she was naive. She believed him and she said that, okay, if my husband is willing to do something like that for me, something that grand, something that sacrificial, which is what she calls the miracle, then it is okay for me to, you know, make these sacrifices for him. But she finds out later that it is not to be. It is not true, that he was just talking. And when you look at it, Nora is somebody you would describe as the pivotal character within this play. The pivotal character is the one who pushes the plot forward through his or her actions. And it's because she borrowed the money first, she forged the signature and all that. And she's been working secretly to pay. And then now her husband gets a promotion and the position of the one who lent her the money is threatened. And now he blackmails her. And now she's having to take action to try to prevent him from revealing her secret. Through that process, the secret comes out anyways. And then now she finds out that all of these things she has done with the intention that her husband would understand. Even society would understand that she did it out of love and desire to save her family. But what does Helma tell her? No, the law doesn't work that way. You've committed a crime, it's a crime. Nobody wants to hear why you did it, you see. And so in the end, she becomes self-aware. Now, do you have any questions about Nora's character? Class, are you there? Do you have any questions about Nora's character?
No, madam.
All right. Now
No, madam.
Okay, great. Let's look at Torvald Helma. His physiology, he could be about 35 to 45. And I'm thinking more like 45 and a bit above, because he's behaving like someone who is much older than her, treating her like a little child. Okay. He talks about her like she's a little child. It means that he's definitely over 10 years older than her. He's healthy now, even though 8 years ago he was sick. But in the course of the plot, we know that he's fine now. He has a certain seriousness about him, where he's too uptight and takes things too seriously. He cares so much about, what people think about him. And so it has given him a certain serious look. But we are not looking at what people think about him here. We are looking at his look, his physiology. There isn't much to say about that. But, the look of seriousness and caring about how people see him is very important because of the mask he was wearing when he went for the masquerade party. He was wearing a mask of middle-class respectability that, oh, I'm climbing this middle-class ladder and I have to behave in accordance to expectations of that class and all that. So that is something we can glean from that. And his social aspects, we know that he's a husband, he has 3 children, he's a lawyer, now a bank manager, and he has a friend. Dr. Rank is his friend. He's also a boss to several others, and including Krogstad, whom he fires in the course of the play. So that is his social aspect. We don't know anything about his parents or anything because it hasn't been revealed in the play. And we are often working with evidence from the text in mind. So we have to just pick those clues. Now, let's look at the psychological. His motivation to maintain good standing in the eyes of society. Like Jennifer said, when she decided that she would rather sympathize with him, that he's trying to do what is morally right within the society. Okay, so that is his motivation, to climb the social ladder, to earn a very respectable position and maintain good standing in the eyes of others. And that is why he was wearing that middle-class respectability mask. And he would sacrifice anything for that because he has been brought up to believe that that is what is most important. He himself, he's not self-aware enough to realize that he's playing the part that has been set for him by society. It was only in the end when he has that conversation with Nora that he realizes that there might be something wrong with his perception about what is right and what is wrong within society. He is controlling and overbearing because of that. Even the arrangement of things in their living room is all done to his taste. He wants to control everything. Even when he finds, what's her name? Christine knitting. He was like, no, it is ugly. Rather take up embroidery, okay? And he thinks very little of his wife's intellect. When Nora was asking Dr. Rank about whether there's something in the scientific papers or something, and he was like, what does little Nora know about science? Okay. But if we are feeling generous, we can accord him, some sympathy because of the society that has created his character. Those of you who have seen Bridgerton, you saw how Anthony and Simon and all those young men were raised to take up responsibilities in the home and all that. And you see how even to defend that honor, they would rather have a duel and, kill each other than to face society with something very embarrassing. Okay, So it is the society he was, brought up in that has created who he is. By the end of the play, when he has that conversation with Nora in the fallen action, remember last week we went through the plot. We saw the conversation they had at the point where the fallen action takes place. And he comes to the realization that he needed to change. He needed to also see things differently. He needed to see Nora as a human being, a moral agent capable of making decisions to save her family, rather than go strictly by what society has carved out for her. Do you have any questions on these two characters? I mean, you can do this analysis for all the other characters, so that you try your hands on it. But by looking at these dimensions, you piece them together and you are able to see where his motivation is coming from. And so you are able to also understand him, rather than strictly just say that, oh, he didn't come through for his wife when she needed him, so he's just a bad person. He deserves to be alone. No, you have to look at it in terms of why he would want to stand by his principles and why he would want to, act the way he does. Does that make sense?
Yes, please.
Yes, madam.
Okay. All right. So in terms of the dialogue, the dialogue is the conversation, the way and manner in which the characters speak to each other. And we can see that because this is a realistic play, that is a play that seeks to model life or mimic life as it is, the conversation is just like the kind of conversation you have on a normal day. So the dialogue is conversational and it is colloquial. It just establishes the relationship that exists among the characters. And sometimes it can be figurative, or, more like presented in a metaphorical or symbolic way. And one example of the use of symbolism in the dialogue is the dialogue between Nora and Dr. Rank. Dr. Rank says, "Next masquerade, I am going to be invisible." Nora says, "That's a funny idea." And then he says, "They say there is a hat, black, huge. Have you never heard of that hat? Have you never heard of the hat that makes you invisible? You put it on and then no one on earth can see you." He is speaking of death in a metaphorical way, and then she understands him and she gets what he's trying to say. Okay, so the dialogue, yes, is straightforward and it is conversational, but then it also has that figurative, symbolist aspect of it that doesn't just make it straightforward, because he's talking about something very serious as his own death. Okay, so he decided to, just cover it up a bit by making it less severe than it is. All right. So in terms of conflict, we know that conflict is the struggle or disagreement that takes place either within a character or between characters or between a character and society, often represented through another character, which can still make it a man against man conflict. And then the other one that takes place within a character is an internal conflict, which is man against himself. Okay. And so we see Nora battling within herself. And the fact that she's had to keep this secret, the secret has been eating her up, and she just cannot wait to finish paying the debt so that she will never have to really reveal it, or so that it doesn't come out. But living with such a huge secret, knowing that everything is hanging in the balance, it could just come off or come out at any time. is something that creates conflict within her. Because on the one hand, she's expected to be open with her husband, tell him the truth and all that. Keeping something like this can be a burden. And then also battling within herself as to whether to take her life or to live, thinking about the cold, icy lake and all that is also a conflict that she had to struggle with within herself. And then there is also Nora and Krogstad, where he's forcing her to do something she would rather not do, go and plead his cause with her husband. And then the conflicts between Nora and Torvald, where she's trying to let him do something he would rather not do. And then now he getting so angry and giving Krogstad his dismissal letter because she was forcing him not to fire him. And then in the end, the bigger conflict between Nora and Torvald, where he's so upset about what she has done. And then she is also, she knows that she has resigned herself because she's going to have to live with this consequence. And then now things turn around and she realizes who he is. And then now there's another huge conflict where because of that disappointment, she has to leave. And Helma cannot bring himself to imagine his home without Nora, which also leads him to that self-realization that maybe there is another way to look at life, to look at things than what he has believed all his life. And so when you look at the conflicts and how it develops within the play, you see how right from the beginning, there is something that looks like a state of balance, a happy home and all that. But we discover there's a huge secret standing between Nora and her husband. And then the threat that Krogstad presents. And then now all the complications that come when Helma decides to sack him. And because of that, there is a letter that is bearing that secret, which she has been fighting for the past 8 years to prevent her husband from seeing. And through that, the letter is read by the one she wants to keep it away from. And then now her own realization about the dollhouse she's living in, where she's pretending and living the kind of life that pleases her husband at her own detriment. And this realization leads her to leave her home. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Yes,
madam.
madam.
All right. So you see, when you are analyzing a play, there are so many angles to it, and a play presents a full life. And so you need to look at it in its totality in order to understand the motivations of the characters within the world they live in, so that the idea behind the play will truly come through and make sense to you. And so when you look at the characters and their behavior, they all work towards proving the theme or idea of the play. And the characters have to have, a very strong motivation to be able to prove the idea of the play without making it look like they are forcing it on you, the reader. I remember last week when we discussed the first part of the play, we discussed the premise as living a life of pretense is like building castles in the sun. And then there is no greater knowledge than self-knowledge. And then there is sacrifice suggests reciprocity. Because when somebody makes a sacrifice for you, it's like automatically there is this suggestion or there is this imperative on you to want to reciprocate. If the person is in trouble, I mean, you are expected to do the same. And so when you look at the situation of Nora, she made huge sacrifices to try to save her husband's life. And so she doesn't see his putting his reputation on the line as too much of a sacrifice for her. But when that reciprocity does not happen, it suddenly dawns on her that, oh, she's living in fool's paradise. She has this idea of, the man she's living with, which is not true. And so she has to do something about it. But as I have always told you, the premise, we normally look at it as the goal of the play, from the playwright's perspective. It can be the theme because the goal in the end reaches us as the theme. So when you look at these, living a life of pretense is like building castles in the sand. When you look at Nora, that's exactly what she does. She's been pretending. She's been pretending to be that innocent girl who doesn't have any idea about real life. Meanwhile, she knows what real life is. Look at all the criminal actions. Look at all the hard work she's been putting in to try to cover her tracks, to try to pay off the debt and all that. And then when you look at this one, there is no greater knowledge than self-knowledge. People can tell you anything about life, but at the end of the day, it is important that you know who you are and you know things for yourself. Else you'll be playing to other people's whims and you will never know who you are and what your own choices would be if you knew who you are. So it is really important that you know yourself. And then sacrifice suggests reciprocity. It's also something you can prove through the actions of Nora. Because at the end of the day, if she wasn't expecting a reciprocal action, she wouldn't be disappointed. Okay. But when you read this play, the most obvious theme that comes up is a happy marriage built on dishonesty is a disaster waiting to happen. It's obvious. It's because she was not honest with him right from the beginning. She wasn't. Everything had been built on lies all these 80 years, and she's been trying to cover up these lies with other lies. Okay. So when you read this play, you see it clearly. If she had opened up right from the beginning to make him aware of what she had done, maybe they would have resolved this issue very early and found a way around it. But she also has a very good reason, which makes it more complicated. It's not that straightforward. Because she knows the kind of society she lives in. A woman doesn't have that kind of freedom to do the things she has done. And so she knows they will be in trouble. She knows it would compromise their marriage and all that. So she also has a reason for not revealing the truth of the situation right from the beginning. But for me, the interpretation that I would want to focus on is self-awareness leads to freedom. Self-awareness leads to freedom. By the end of the play, Nora gains self-awareness. It makes her very complex. At the beginning, she was presented as somebody who is naive, who doesn't really, know much about life, who is just pretending, or who is playing to please her husband all the time. But now she gains self-awareness, her ability to make judgments for herself. Now she has come to understand that all her knowledge about life and all that, all her understanding about everything and her perceptions about life come from her father, her husband, or pastors. And so she realizes the truth of her imprisonment within her society because she doesn't have any freedom to think and act for herself. So when you extend this, because what she tells you is that, I mean, when he asks her, where is your religion? Where is your sense of duty? All of these things are things that she had been told by either her father, her husband, or pastors. But now, her self-awareness is forcing her to try to figure things out for herself. And it is important, like I always tell you, as we are reading these plays, we are learning from these plays. And you are supposed to learn the importance of, being self-aware and questioning the source of your perceptions and knowledge about life so that you can figure things out for yourself based on principles and values, so that you are not manipulated by other people's agenda. You are not easily fooled. And so self-awareness is key to living meaningfully and uniquely, because that is when you'll be able to judge things for yourself so that you take actions based on who you are as a unique human being. When Nora was thinking that, hey, if my husband is dying and there is no one to endorse my signature, my father is sick, I mean, I can't go and bother him with these things. And it is up to me to save my husband's life. And this is the only way. And I make that decision. Why wouldn't anybody want to understand that? She's questioning the laws, that the laws are unfair. They are unjust. These are her views. These are her own views, because she is rationalizing. It is only when Krogstad tells her that this is illegal. That's when then the laws are flawed. That's what she says. This is Nora thinking for herself. If the laws are just, they will understand why I behaved the way I behaved. I did not do it for selfish reasons. I did it to save my husband's life. If nobody understands that, then it is not worth living this life. I would rather get out. I don't know where I'm going, but I'm going to find things out for myself. And so this is what led Nora to make the decision she makes in the play by the end. Do you have any questions? Let me hear your questions. Yes. I've said a lot of things. Do you have any questions? Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Yes, so talk to me. Talk to me, let me hear your questions or contributions.
I don't have a question.
You don't have a question, but do you have something to say about what you've learned, contributions? So now I'm going to ask you questions. What have you learned in this lecture? What have you learned? Oh, go ahead, I'm listening. What have you learned in this lecture?
Madam,
Yes, Jennifer.
from what you told us, I've learned not to lie. Like, even if you lie, even if it takes 100 years, the truth will still come out.
Yeah, it will come out. It will come out. And so you have learned to be honest.
Yes, ma.
Okay. Yes, Mildred. Hello,
Yes,
Mildred.
madam.
Let's hear you. What have you learned?
Please, I learned that we have to be self-aware.
Okay. Self-awareness. Okay. And I mean, tell me more. We have to be self-aware. And so what does that mean? Tell me more. Hello, Mildred. Mildred, I'm still
Yes,
listening.
madam.
Yeah,
Yes,
tell
madam.
tell me more.
We
Oh,
have
that's
to be
all you-
conscious of what we do. We have to be conscious about what we do, our characters, our feelings, everything.
Okay. All right. Obed.
Madam,
Yes.
madam, I learned that ignorance of the law is of no excuse.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. Okay. So yes, Nora doesn't know much about the law, and she has her own understanding, but it doesn't still prevent the law from taking its course. Okay. Any more? What about the others? What are the 3 dimensions of character? Any
Madam,
of
please,
you?
I learned. Please, I want to
Okay.
talk about what I learned.
All right, Pokwa.
I learned that we should know ourselves well. We should know ourselves enough to take decisions and not be led by what society thinks and all that. And I think custard is annoying.
Really?
Yes.
Why? What makes
Yes.
him annoying?
The way he wants to blackmail Torvald, Nora, to let Torvald allow him work at the place, at the bank.
Okay,
Yes.
that's what makes him annoying.
Yes.
But when you look at his reasons, don't you understand him? You understand?
No, because it was stated that he is morally corrupt, so he deserves everything that's happening to him.
Okay. Thank you, Pukwa. Isa, Aisha.
Okay, madam, I learned that as a young girl, you need to find your self-worth or self-love before deciding to get into marriage, because one-sided love does not work.
Okay. Thank you, Aisha. One-sided love does not work. Okay. Damien. Vera. Hello, Vera. Vera, let's hear you. Oh, I can't find. Yes. Yes, Vera. Oh, Vera, your network is not stable. Maybe you should type your contribution. Okay. Vera, type your contribution. I'll read it. I want to say something about what Pokwa said regarding Krogstad. It is Mrs. Lind was his former lover. That's why she was being empathetic towards him. But I think there's something we can learn from her as well. When we say people are morally corrupt and all that, we have to also look at the circumstances they have had to endure, which turned them, into the kind of people they have become in society. And so instead of judging people harshly, we should also look at their situation more holistically. Okay, because others are saying these people are corrupt, they are corrupt. This is the man who has children and he needs to take care of his children. and everybody is shunning him. Even at this point, he's trying to, you heard what he said. He's trying to correct all the wrongs he has done by working his honest job. And the honest job, Torvald, because of his own masculine insecurities, is trying to sack him from there because the guy knew him in the past and the guy is calling him by his first name. That's a very frivolous reason to sack the man. And so that is why I'm teaching you about character analysis. You can apply it to everyone in your life so that you don't judge people harshly. You have to look beyond what you see on the surface. Look at his psychology, look at his social aspects. Just look at the person as a whole human being. The fact that he also has mouths to feed, and the fact that nobody wants to treat him well, even when this is a point in his life where he wants to do honest work. People do deserve second chances. You can't just, condemn them and that's it. When somebody does wrong and the person is willing to change, to do things right, you don't, take help away from the person. You don't just relegate the person to, the junkyard and say that you are condemned. No, every human being deserves, a chance. So Pokua, when you are feeling very generous, think about Krogstad again. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Do you have any more contributions to add or questions? If you don't, then I'll see you next week, Lord willing. Next week we are moving on to another full-length play, which is Mother Courage and Her Children. I'm hoping that you have already started reading it or have even finished reading it.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes, madam, it's plenty.
I know. Do it in bits. That's why I told you right from the beginning, you read in bits, okay? And make notes as you read so that by the time you finish, you already have your summary, okay? All right, so take good care of yourselves. I'll see you next week, Lord willing. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay,
Bye. Have a beautiful weekend.
Thank you.
bye.
Bye.
Bye.